Unlike most African Americans who were freed by the end of the Civil War, your ancestors weren't.
They couldn't get it right.
Well,
They just stuck to it.
well, somebody didn't get it right, but it wasn't your ancestors, it was the people who owned them. Take a look at this.
Chickasaw Nation Freedmen Roll.
This document is an official enrollment card for the Chickasaw freedmen, the former slaves owned by the Chickasaw Nation.
Owned by the Chickasaw Nation.
Owned by the Chickasaw Nation. Your ancestors were enslaved by Native Americans.
That's Don Cheadle finding out. I don't know if that show's even still on, where they check the ancestry of celebrities, and so it was an interesting show. Not so much because of celebrities, but because that whole ancestry thing is absolutely fascinating. The reason I'm sharing that was because right now, as we speak, the intersectional, if you will, the tribe mentality that's going on in the United States, where we're all just kind of finding corners and digging in, and just we're finding ways to separate ourselves from each other. And Don Cheadle, in that instance, finds out that he is a black man in the United States whose family, his ancestors, were owned by what we call indigenous people, or Native American, what have you. So you can remember just a few. Lost my train of thought. You can remember it wasn't that long ago, and even today, there's this still the battle's a lot smaller now, because that the indigenous, or natives, if you will, people are kind of swayed the country enough to where they've gotten rid of Columbus Day. Now, Columbus has his own history that's questionable. But we had a Columbus Day where we said that Columbus that he discovered America, and that's why we have a Columbus. That's why we basically have this Columbus Day. And so what's happened in years, in the last few years, or several years actually, the indigenous people have pretty much sold the fact that Columbus to them was a terrorist. He was a murderer, a thief, what have you. So some cities are doing away, some states are doing away with Columbus Day. And they're taking on this mantle of Indigenous Peoples Day. In Cook County, there is someone that is not necessarily happy about the decision. Not so much of taking away Columbus Day. They're okay with that. But turning it into Indigenous Peoples Day, which takes us back to the Don Cheadle clip there. I'm going to read this little excerpt to you. They, meaning indigenous people, are, this is quote, discriminating against us, and if they do not want to recognize the freedmen and their descendants, they should no longer accept nor receive federal taxpayer dollars based upon the census population of freedom. So then this person, Stanley Moore, is fairly upset and is expecting reparations from what we know as indigenous people. He's saying that the indigenous people are denying their role, and that that they're the descendants of the freedmen are not including them on any benefits that indigenous people receive from the United States, any land, casino profits. My point is, when does this stop? I've said it before, and I'll say it again. The idea of us separating each other, we will always find the victim role. We're all going to be able to find some sort of victim role if we look deep enough or far enough back. And what's happening in this case is that a new movement is happening among a separate movement is happening among black people that are not only looking for reparations, which was, its own ridiculous, theory, notion, what have you. Remember the question, how will we figure out reparations? Because there are some black slave owners in fact, the first actual slave that was okayed by the United States, a United States courtroom, was a black man that was now going to be owned at the time by another black man. The slavery that came over here before that was British slavery. We were still British. We were just these colonies, but we were still under British law. They came over, and it was illegal to have a certain status in England and not have slaves. So you ended up bringing slaves. As time went on, and a sense of freedom, a sense of Christianity, a sense of just God in general took over, and being far enough away from British rule, the King's rule, the sense of freedom became far more important and far more realistic and God-like, more Christian-like, I should say. So the United States is the first and, quite frankly, the only country that did away with their Bill of Rights and that did away with slavery. People don't necessarily talk about that, and you talk about the Declaration of Independence, or I should say, in the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights, they've done it away. People don't talk about that because they go, that was done back in the 1700s. And in the 1800s, an indentured servant felt that he had paid his debt. And a man said that he took him to court. And because he liked the idea of having that person doing the work for him. So he took him to court, and the court said, yeah, dude, you got to stick around for this guy. Again, that was a black man that took another black man to court. And the court said you will work for this man until you die. Hence the beginning of the actual American slavery. During that time, the Native Americans as well would gather black people and had its own slavery amongst several indigenous people nations, native nations. And now what's happening is black people are not letting that slide. If they're looking for reparations, they are looking for reparations from everybody. So that what seemed like a ridiculous question was how will we figure out how black people are supposed to be paid reparations? Because that's still not off the table. It certainly isn't. And if you're going to try to figure it, you're in for a very tangled mess. If you're going to try to figure this one out, you got yourself an issue here. Again, it is now coming out that black people will put pressure on indigenous people. There's a segment of black people that will which means that they will have to sell this. They will have to sell this point to the public, creating more hate. Indeed, creating more hate. And it is going to be an easy sell because they already have the haters in place. So another angle of hate, another group to separate into, another corner to dig your heels in is right at the precipice. So, that being said, I've said it before, it's going to get a lot worse before it gets any better. And the answer is so incredibly easy. Things have been so hard because we've decided to segregate ourselves into these little victim categories. So we keep doing that, and it's getting worse. So my assumption is that if we do the opposite and try to find out where our common ground is, we'll have a far different outcome. Segregation is incredibly acceptable right now. It is all the rage. It's too bad. Because I remember a time in the 60s where we were asking to be judged on the content of our character and not by the color of our skin. AD Jet Noise, ADA Jet Noise, Rumble, Facebook, YouTube, Parler really soon, and Instagram really soon. I know I keep talking about it and I keep putting it off, but it is in the works. Thanks for joining me this time around. And I hope to see you soon. Until then, big hug. Be good. Be still. Enjoy your life.